to make them an idol, a golden calf. And they're worshiping it, and they're saying, this is the God that brought us up out of Egypt. Moses, I'm just going to wipe them out, and I'll make a good nation out of you. Well, you know how the scripture says Moses interceded for them, so don't do that. And God says, well, get down there and take care of them. So Moses and Joshua would go down the mountain. When they're about halfway down, Joshua says, man, you hear that? He said, that sounds like they're in a battle. Moses said, it's not a battle. They're doing stuff they shouldn't be doing. And when they get down there and Moses sees all the running around and things that are going on, he takes these two big pillars, and you've seen pictures of them, these big rocks, and just smashes them. Can you imagine if you're one of these people having a good old time and Moses, the leader, comes down, shiny face and all? Moses is ticked royally, isn't he? And then he says, who's on the Lord's side? Come to me. And all the Levites came. And here's what Moses said. Strap a sword to your side and go through and kill all your brothers and your neighbors. Anyone that comes in contact with, kill them. Now, wouldn't that bless you? So they did. Scripture said that night 3,000 were killed. And then Moses just kind of, you don't hear any more about the rest of the night. In the morning he tells the people, you have sinned against God. I think if it had been me, I'd say, once again. Seemed like every time Moses turned around, they were doing something wrong. He said, well, you sinned again. And this time God throws a plague out against them, and many died that day. So picture Moses, here he is trying to do what God wanted him to do, trying to save these people. And every time he turns around, they're doing something wrong. They're messing up. They're telling him he's no good, and you're a bad leader, and on and on and on. Don't you think maybe Moses was a little discouraged? A little depressed, a little bit down. But God says, Moses, it's okay. I know you. And sometimes when we're depressed and when we're down, God's saying that to you. He's saying, Larry, I know you. It's okay. Norma, I know you too, God is saying. He's saying these things to us. And then in Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 5, he told Jeremiah that he knows him too. That verse reads like this. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. That's a good verse for being against abortion, isn't it? God knew him before he was even formed in the womb. My dad used to say, before I was a twinkle in his eye, God knew me. And then Jesus in chapter 10 of John, verses 14, 15, 27, 28, he says, I know my sheep. Isn't it amazing to stop and think about a sheep? There's two things that jump out at us about sheep. They're about the dumbest of all animals, aren't they? And they're the most helpless of all animals. And guess what? That's how we are referred to as sheep. We had an old evangelist that used to say we were dumb. Remember that? But yet God says, I know a sheep. He knows you. He knows what's going on in your life. You stop to think about that. This type of knowledge strongly implies a personal affection, redeeming an action, covenant faithfulness, and providential watch and care over all of those whom he knows. And you know what really matters is not the fact that I know God and how great that is, but what's most important is he knows me. He knows what's going on in my life on a daily basis. And as we look over Psalm 139 and we read through the sections, you realize that you really don't have to have a commentary to understand it. It's pretty clear, isn't it? Number two, he knows everything about me. He knows everything about me. He knows what's going on in my life. There are no secrets from him. You know, the old devil comes on us and he says, you know there is such a thing as a secret sin. Steve, you can do that, nobody will know. Well, we might be able to fool each other, but you can't fool God. He is omniscient, which means he knows all things. And he's omnipresent, which means he's everywhere at the same time. You can't get away with it. And it doesn't matter who you are. Whether you're one of the great preachers of all times, or whether you're a layperson, or whatever you are, God knows what's going on in your life. He knows who you are, and He knows everything that's going on. Folks, our lives are really nothing more than an open book before Him. He knows us so well that even the hairs in our head are numbered. And He knows our daily activities. You know He knows what time you get up. He knows how long it takes you to get ready to go to work. He knows the route that you take to work. He knows what you're going to do during the day, and He knows what you're going to do on the way home. And He even knows the TV program that you're going to watch. And He knows what that recliner looks like that you are going to get in with that glass of iced tea or Coke. He knows all these things about us. And according to verse 4, listen to this. He knows what we're going to say before we even utter the word. You know, sometimes wives and husbands that have been married for a long time, we can finish each other's sentences, you know. Sometimes with Faith, you know, she'll start to tell me one of her stories, and I'll finish it for her. And sometimes I'm right, but it's getting to be, the older that I get, and the older she gets, she'll go, "That's not what I was going to say." I said, "Are you sure?" And she said, "Yes." "Now, will you shut up and let me finish my story?" "Yes, dear." God knows every word that's going to come out of your mouth. Is that awesome or what? He knows us. And then number 3, He knows where we are. He knows where we are. He knows where we are physically all the time. You know, there are many airplanes that have programs that show where they are at any given moment. But God's got an even better program than that. He knows where you are exactly 24/7. You're never out of His radar. He knows what's going on in your life. And He knows where we are emotionally. Not only does He know where we are physically, He knows where we are emotionally. When I think about that, I thought about 1 Kings 19 and Elijah. Leading up to that, Elijah had really, he'd called a drought. So there had been a drought for a couple of years. And then he appears before the wicked King Ahab, and he says, you know, he says, it's time for the nation of Israel to make a decision who's God. If Baal is God, then let's worship Baal. But if God is God, then let's worship Him. I propose a contest, and the God that answers with fire, He'll be the God. And the king said, okay. He said, King, call all the nation of Israel to Mount Carmel, and we'll have this contest. And the God that answers by fire is going to be God. The king said, okay. And so all the prophets of Baal and Ashtoreth were there, and Elijah said, here's the deal. Each of us will sacrifice a steer, set it up on our altar, and the God that answers by fire, He'll be God, okay? Sure. And he said, okay, boys, you go first. And I can picture Elijah doing one of these. Now, they didn't have watches back then, but if they did, I could see him doing this, you know. He said the prophets of Baal, they kind of danced around, and they screamed, and they hollered, and there was no answer from Baal. And after a while, Elijah said, well, you know, maybe he's taking a nap. Maybe if you just yell a little bit louder. So they yelled louder, still no answer. Well, maybe he's on vacation. So they yelled even louder, and they began to cut themselves, and the blood flowed freely from them, but still there was no answer. One translation says, I know what it is. He went to the bathroom. He can't hear you. Well, finally, if he'd had a watch, I'm sure he would have went, okay, it's my turn now. And he rebuilt the altar. You know, we heard a pastor not too long ago talk about the fact that we need to rebuild the altar in our churches. But Elijah rebuilt the altar that had been broken down, laid the sacrifice out, and then he had him pour water over the sacrifice stone and rock 3 times, barrels of water. And then he simply prayed, Lord, let these people know who the God is. And the fire fell. Can you imagine being one of these Israelites who were kind of fence strappers? Here's what they said. We were on your side all the time. We knew God is God. We were with you all the time, Elijah. And then Elijah said, well, wipe out these false prophets. And they did. They killed them all. And then he goes up on the mountain. He's kind of resting. And he tells his servant, he said, go out there and look. He said, it's going to rain. And you know when it rains, there's usually a bunch of clouds. Well, there was no clouds.